so hinky. God of War goes back to its roots with God of War Ascension to explore Kratos' journey from the time he breaks his oath with Ares to the time he sets out to destroy him. So should the past stay the past, or will this be a welcome trip down memory lane? Let's find out.
Hello, Kratos. What's wrong? You seem confused, Kratos. Having trouble...
In Ascension, your journey begins inside of Hecatoncheires, a massive prison where the Furies bring those foolish enough to break an oath with a god to torture them for all eternity. Fortunately for you, even though Kratos isn't a god in this game, he's still a huge badass, so the prison doesn't hold you for long. Upon escaping your bonds across the span of the game, you discover how Kratos came to be locked up in this dismal place, and how he goes about freeing himself of his blood oath with the God of War, which is essentially your active quest throughout the campaign. Free yourself of your oath so that you can take your revenge on Ares. In addition to being supremely powerful beings, the Furies also use their dark magic to project illusions into Kratos' mind, perverting his sense of what is real and what isn't. Story-wise, the game is phenomenal for the most part. Graphically, God of War is outstanding as well. Everything runs fairly smoothly, though I did notice a bit of slowdown sometimes when there was a ton of stuff going on the screen, particularly when I was doing magic attacks. As good as the game looks, and it is truly epic in God of War fashion, there were a few times when the camera got in the way of fully enjoying the experience. These sections were mostly toward the beginning of the game, so it didn't ruin it, but seriously, how can I even distinguish myself from the bad guys at this point? I get it, Sony, your game looks good, but I'd rather not die repeatedly for the purpose of you showing off your art design. Okay, it is awesome, but still. In Ascension, though Kratos doesn't have the power of a god, he does still have those sweet swords, and luckily for you, they get infused with the power of the gods. It's funny because the tagline is, before he was a god, he was a man, but I guess it should have been, before he was a god, he was a man, with the power of gods. Anyway, though your basic attacks look the same, each different infusion comes equipped with different Fury attacks as well as Fury mode abilities and magic abilities. Each weapon also gives you different bonuses for killing your enemies with them. In addition to your weapons, you'll add several trinkets to your arsenal, including the Amulet of Ouroboros, which slows enemies caught in its blast, and the Oath Stone of Orcos, which allows you to be in two places at once, or more practically in combat, summons a second version of you to wreak havoc. Nothing seems changed in a big way about the combat system other than the tools at your disposal, and it's a good thing because the combat in God of War has always been slick and stylized, and Ascension is no exception. In addition to the combat, God of War Ascension also had a heavy puzzle-solving aspect, and I have to say it was a lot of fun. Though the puzzles were fairly easy, each one took a little bit of thought, and they were definitely a great break from the combat. My only problem with the combat is that while God of War 3 had a ton of weapons that each had their own distinct feel and use, God of War Ascension, despite having many different weapon powers, essentially gives you the same weapons for the whole game. It's a minor complaint, and the powers do distinguish each godly infusion from the next, but it's definitely worth mentioning. The combos just weren't as in-depth. Another minor issue was with the sound. Sound design and music were very well done, but every now and then a sound would be missing or delayed, which caused some very intense combat moments to have way less impact. It didn't happen too often, but it was a consistent issue throughout the whole game. There were other minor bugs here and there, but none that were big enough to bring up. My final complaint with Ascension is very specific. Ever since Dante's Inferno, one of my biggest pet peeves is people placing challenge levels into a game that have almost nothing to do with the storyline. God of War Ascension does this in a very big and disappointing way with the Trials of Archimedes. After every tough fight in the entire campaign, you either get some health and mana, a save point, or both. So what do the Trials of Archimedes do? They throw you into a 3-stage challenge level with only a cursory connection to the story, and the first stage comprises what I would consider the hardest fight in the entire game. Upon completing a stage, you get no health and no checkpoint, meaning that if you die at any point during the 3 stages, you go all the way back to the bottom. Not only was this segment a bit of a pointless nuisance, but it came when the story was reaching a fever pitch, which ultimately interrupted the flow of the game to the point where I almost had to remind myself what was going on afterward. I have to say I did feel really accomplished after finally beating it, but it wasn't enough to make me wish that it hadn't been in the game entirely. Finally, we come to probably my favorite part of God of War Ascension, the multiplayer. In addition to being generally awesome when you enter the multiplayer mode for the first time, there's even a really cool tie into the single-player campaign that I won't spoil for you here, but it was definitely good design all around. When you play multiplayer, you give your allegiance to one of 4 gods, either Ares, Hades, Zeus, or Poseidon, and each one has their own strengths and weaknesses. Ares is brute strength, Hades is based on stealth, Zeus on offensive damage-based magic, and Poseidon on more support-style magic, and you level the abilities and god-specific items separately. Each allegiance fits a very definite role in a team format, but is also good enough to function on its own in a free-for-all setting, opening the game up to a variety of playstyles. Mechanics-wise, you have light attacks that can be blocked and parried, heavy unblockable attacks, several special moves, and an active spell, as well as a grapple. Each fight turns into a chess match of when to throw out each ability to effectively take down your opponent. What this means is, if you are very skilled, you can take on 2 opponents at once and come out on top. It's a brilliantly simple system that ultimately has a vast amount of depth. When you level up, you unlock new armor, weapons, and abilities, and while these do give you an advantage, the combat system is designed such that a low-level player can still kill a high-level player despite their disadvantage. The level design for online play is very good as well, with different traps, items, and level-specific abilities to take advantage of, and most of the levels seem to have some element of variable terrain, which keeps things interesting. There are a bunch of game modes, but aside from capture the flag, the main goal of each one is simple: kill each other. Honestly, I would say that the multiplayer is flawless, and I see myself spending a lot of time with it.
Vengeance.
God of War Ascension is a great game that could have been flawless were it not for a few glaring mistakes. It is still awesome though, and with a virtually flawless multiplayer that is a ton of fun, is definitely worth picking up, especially if you've been a fan of the franchise for a while. I was going to give God of War Ascension a 9 out of 10, but because that damn Trials of Archimedes pissed me off so much, I'm going to give it 8.5 Angry Sohinkis out of 10. But for your purposes, I guess you can just consider it a 9 if you want. Thanks for watching, guys, and I'll see you next time.